والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. One of the important things that Ubudiyya, act of worship in the heart that is mentioned in the Quran in many verses is Al-Yaqeen. And Al-Yaqeen is certainty. And when the ulama define Al-Yaqeen, they mention different things, but one of which is استقرار العلم في القلب. When the knowledge is well established in the heart, does not leave the heart. So you have ilm, you have knowledge, and the knowledge, when a person acquires it, the knowledge of the wahy, that comes with it al-yaqeen, certainty, because the ilm, the knowledge is of the unseen, the knowledge of the deen. And therefore the person has to have the yaqeen. That's why there's a famous statement from some of the early generations of Islam, where they say, al-ilmu yasta'miluk wal-yaqeenu yahmiluk, which means the knowledge gets you to do things. We don't act unless we have the knowledge of it. This is one of the principles of the deen of Islam. We don't do anything, matters of belief, matters of ibadah, the deen, unless we get to know first that this is what's in the Quran, in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the early generations of Islam were upon it. No one is to invent their own deen, whether it's matters of aqidah, matters of belief, whether it's matters of ibadah. And that's why the dalal and the bid'ah and the ahwa, the desires, something that came later, not at the time of the Prophet ﷺ or the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, started to happen at the end of the time of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. And the people of knowledge, they, with the ilm, they refuted all of these deviations. Because people allowed themselves to invent or to use their own reason in the deen, and they think that this is part of being intellectual, that you would put your own desire, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not call it intellectual or reason, He called it hawa, desire. And it's sinful desire because you have wahy, protected revelation from Allah. Use your reason in understanding the wahy, to understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. Use it in your livelihood matters, but not to twist or to change or to alter the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore al-yaqeen is required. Al-yaqeen carries the person. So when a person has the knowledge, then the yaqeen will carry him. That means makes it easy for the person to do what he knows. If a person knows that the salah, this is the second pillar of al-Islam, and to establish the salah and to get to know the rules of it, then with the yaqeen, with the certainty, then it makes it easy for the person. He's been carried by the yaqeen to establish the salah in the most perfect way, to come to the house of Allah, to leave the distractions so that the person would establish the deen of Allah, the salah. في بيوت أذن الله أن ترفع ويذكر فيها اسمه يسبح له فيها بالغدو والأصال رجال لا تلهيهم تجارة ولا بيع عن ذكر الله وإقام الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة يخافون يوما تتقلب فيه القلوب والأبصار. In the houses of Allah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permitted for it to be erected and to be built, in it are men, those who no amusement or trade will distract them away from establishing the salah. What made them be in that state is al-yaqeen. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, because al-yaqeen, since it's in the heart, then the physical actions becomes easy. And when a person sees that the physical actions are not made easy, he has to question what's in his heart. With al-ikhlas, sincerity, with the love of Allah, the fear of Allah, the hope for the rewards from Allah, the yaqeen, the certainty in the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And once the heart, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees what's in the heart. As the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنْظُرُ إِلَى صُوَرِكُمْ وَلَا إِلَى أَجْسَامِكُمْ وَلَكِنْ يَنْظُرُ إِلَى قُلُوبِكُمْ وَأَعْمَالِكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not look at your images and your bodies, but looks at your hearts and your actions. This is what we are, as always repeated. Human beings, when they turn away from the wahy, what is the thing that make them different, separate from one another, superior, inferior, oppression, oppressed, whatever, is not the hearts and not the actions. It's how a person looks, where a person was born, these types of silly things that makes people fight with each other. But from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the Lord of the Alameen. So there's no difference between white or black, Arab or non-Arab, all of that, except إلا بالتقوى, as the Prophet ﷺ said, except by the taqwa, which is the amal. Human beings are nothing but a'mal, actions. And at the end, this body that we have, the physical body, will be buried and no body anymore. It decays. But the actions, what stays forever, and the effect of it stays forever in Darul Jaza, in the place of recompense in the hereafter. And deeds are hearts and physical actions. So hearts are not just wishful thinking. These are actions. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees in the hearts of a believer actions being done, deeds are being done in the heart, the world changes as a result of that. And these deeds done by the heart is the tawheed, the oneness of worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the sound aqidah, the sound creed, that we get to know it from the wahy. صدق الاتباع, the truthfulness of following the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. All of that, we're not talking about physical actions yet. All of that is in the heart. The yaqeen, the certainty in the rewards from Allah, tawakkul ala Allah, to rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fully. And al-rida, to be pleased with Allah, the fear of Allah, the love of Allah. All of these are actions. And these are the characteristics of the believers. And once these things are in the heart and the person is implementing this in his heart and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees that, then the matter after that becomes the easiest thing for people to be steadfast upon the deen of Allah. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, those who gave pledge to the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, bay'atul aqaba, under the tree, he said, لَقَدْ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذْ يُبَايِعُونَكَ تَحْتَ الشَّجَرَةِ فَعَلِمَ مَا فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ فَأَنزَلَ السَّكِينَةَ عَلَيْهِمْ وَأَثَابَهُمْ فَتْحًا قَرِيبًا. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala indeed, for sure, radiya, He's pleased with the believers when they gave you the pledge, O Prophet of Allah, under the tree. فَعَلِمَ مَا فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ. Allah knew what's in their hearts. So as a result of that, فَأَنزَلَ السَّكِينَةَ عَلَيْهِمْ. He brought down as-sakina, the tranquility, and as-sakina from as-sukun, that the heart is calm, is not going everywhere. وَأَثَابَهُمْ فَتْحًا قَرِيبًا, and He gave them the reward of a near fath of Mecca, which is something that changed completely the way of how things were at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. All of that because فَعَلِمَ مَا فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ. Physical action, they were given pledge to the Prophet ﷺ, but what's in their hearts, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew that, and He sees what's in the hearts. And we get to know that from the wahy. People lived, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed Quran to show us so that we follow their ways, because the sunnah of Allah, the way of Allah, is the same. So therefore the hearts are the most important place where a person has to take care of, and there are means to establish this, which is one of which, of course, is at tadabbur al-Quran, to reflect upon the Quran. And فَعَلِمَ مَا فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ, as they said, the sakina, the tuma'nina. And part of the certainty causes the heart to have tuma'nina, to have tranquility in it, because the matter is very clear. The believers, no matter how difficult their situation or ease or whatever, they have the certainty, everything is by Allah. They see the actions of Allah and they understand the ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as it's mentioned in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So that life is a goodly life. And it's an everlasting joy that they enjoy the obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the same thing when they talked about the level of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, when it was said, ما سبقكم أبو بكر بكثرة صوم ولا صلاة ولكن بشيء وقر في قلبي. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he did not go ahead, surpass the entire ummah by more fasting or more salah, but rather something that was well established in his heart, did not leave his heart. And if the heart does not have the sakina and the tranquility, then it's the opposite. Then the person is not able to do anything in the right way. So the point again is with the yaqeen, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees it, and that's how the person has to implement it. And as Khalid ibn Ma'dan, he said, one of the early generations of Islam, he said, تعلموا اليقين, learn al-yaqeen, كما تعلموا القرآن, the same way that you learn the Quran, whether to learn to recite the Quran or learn anything in the Quran, حتى تعرفوه, حتى تعرفوه, till you get to know the yaqeen. So you learn the yaqeen. How to learn al-yaqeen is to learn the deen of Allah, is to reflect upon the Quran And to learn it, that means to keep on implementing it in our heart. And that's why it's with reading the Quran, with taking lessons from the Quran. If the Quran talks about stories, it gives us the ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that never changes, is to have that reflection, is to think. And that's why Shaykh al-Islam Tamiya rahimahullah, when he said, أما اليقين فهو طمأنينة القلب واستقرار العلم فيه. Is the طمأنينة, tranquility of the heart, and the knowledge is established there. وبالآخرة هم يوقنون. They have certainty in the hereafter. أفحكم الجاهلية يبغون ومن أحسن من الله حكما لقوم يوقنون. For the believers, those of certainty, there is nothing better for them than the hukm, than the judgment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warned the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam and the Ummah not to be deceived or belittled or fooled by those who have yaqeen, have no yaqeen. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَاصْبِرْ إِنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ حَقٌّ وَلَا يَسْتَخِفَّنَّكَ الَّذِينَ لَا يُوقِنُونَ. فَاصْبِرْ, be patient. Because indeed the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the truth, and that's the yaqeen. The promise of Allah is the truth. Even if your situation now is, a person would say that how can that happen, as the messengers of Allah, that they would say, أم حسبتم أن تدخلوا الجنة ولما يأتيكم مثل الذين خلوا من قبلكم مستهم البأساء والضراء وزلزلوا حتى يقول الرسول والذين آمنوا معه متى نصر الله ألا إن نصر الله قريب. Or you think that you will enter Jannah and then without getting to know the way of Allah, which is how that those who were before you, they faced adversities and difficulties, and they were shaken so much, to the extent of which that the messengers of Allah and the believers would say, when is the victory of Allah? Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, indeed the victory of Allah and the help of Allah is near. So, فَاصْبِرْ إِنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ حَقٌّ, know that the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the truth, and then this is the warning. وَلَا يَسْتَخِفَّنَّكَ. Al-khiffa is light, when someone is light-headed, right? When someone is a fool. So do not make those who لا يوقنون, those who have no certainty, do not fool you, do not belittle you, make you like that you're nobody. So the believers is never fooled by this, never deceived. Why? Because he has the book of Allah. And the book of Allah explains the matter clearly of who are the enemies and who's the friends and how to protect oneself and things like this. And al-imamah in deen, to reach the highest level matters of deen, is with as-sabr wal-yaqeen, with patience and yaqeen, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about Bani Israel, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنْهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَهْدُونَ بِأَمْرِنَا لَمَّا صَبَرُوا وَكَانُوا بِآيَاتِنَا يُوقِنُونَ. We made them a'imma, leaders, when guided by the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when they were patient and they were with the ayat of Allah instead of yaqeen. So when some of the things that we mentioned before, where the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and how they're like Ibn Mas'ud, for example. I don't want to take too much of your time. You guys are awake or keep going? Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, companion radiallahu anhu, he said, Al-Yaqeen alla turdi an-nasa bi sakhatillah. If you have yaqeen, certainty, do not please the people by displeasing Allah, because it's always the test. Either to compromise your deen to please others, or you please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So if a person has and this is how to learn al-yaqeen. This is how the heart gets changed. When someone knows that this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from him, then he's patiently applying this, and the importance of knowledge, so that a person is not also doing things foolishly. وَلَا تَحْمَدْ أَحَدًا عَلَى رِزْقِ اللَّهِ. And do not praise someone, and alhamd is the perfect praise. When you perfect praise someone because of the provisions from Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the provider. So if the provision from Allah comes to you through a human being, you're grateful to the human being, because the Prophet ﷺ said, مَنْ لَمْ يَشْكُرِ النَّاسِ لَمْ يَشْكُرِ اللَّهِ. Whoever is not grateful to the people, he is not grateful to Allah. So this is given. But in the heart, and the way that the person would act, this person or that mean is a creation of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that sent this mean to provide for you the provision. So who's the one to be grateful to in the absolute sense and to praise is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the yaqeen. So this is how the heart will see it. And that's why al-itta'adh, al-i'tibar, to learn these types of meanings constantly when we're awake. If you received something, before you see the hands or the person or whatever, the heart is seeing. The heart is seeing the actions of Allah. that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that provided this. And as the person from the early generations of Islam, when he was traveling and he sat down on the desert to eat, and he opened the food, and an animal came, small animal came, ran and just snatched something and ran away. Immediately, he says, Subhanallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent him from his home carrying the provision of that animal. Right? This is how the heart is working, seeing the qadr of Allah and how things are. If he would not do this as a choice, right? He's not at home, let me go to the desert and get some food, maybe some animal, and bring them provisions for them. No one with a sound mind would do this. But this is how they would see how things are based on the actions from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And وَلَا تَلُمْ أَحَدًا عَلَى مَا لَمْ يُؤْتِكَ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَ. And do not blame anyone about something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not give to you. Which is basically when we blame others because they didn't do something. And again, these types of things, it doesn't mean that people become without any faults whatsoever. But again, it's the hearts. When a person is so much disturbed because someone or a loved one or a close person, whatever there is, did not fulfill the rights. Why can it be seen also that this is part of one's sins? You don't have to say that to them so that they don't increase the trouble coming from them. I'm just going to punish you. I'm being sent to punish. No one, of course, would ever say something like this. But the heart is working with the certainty. And that's why they would see their sins in their actions, from the spouses, from whatever transportations, things like this. So, وَلَا تَلُمْ أَحَدًا عَلَى مَا لَمْ يُؤْتِكَ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَ. And therefore the blame would be very justified for someone that his heart is like this. And it would have the nasiha and the concern towards the one that was supposed to fulfill your right. It will be more of a concern towards them more than anything else, because it's already done. It's already finished. So that means this was the qadr of Allah. And this is how the person would learn the matters of Al-Yaqeen. And then he says, فَإِنَّ الرِّزْقَ لَا يَسُوقُ حِرْصُ حَرِيص وَلَا يَرُدُّ كَرَاهِيَةُ كَارِهٍ. Because the rizq from Allah is not dragged to you by your eagerness. This is one of the things that if you can change one's heart or change someone's heart in this, he becomes the happiest person on the face of earth. Especially for the young ones. When you think of rizq, when you think of money and jobs and things like this, you think that unless you have to think of it and be concerned of it, no, it doesn't work this way. You have physical means, take the physical means. Your heart is not concerned. Your heart has so much strength in it that Ar-Razzaq is Allah, and you take all of the physical means perfectly, mashallah, without undermining without compromising the deen of Allah. This is how the rizq comes. So your rizq is not going to come to you because you're so much haris, because you're so much greedy, or you're so much wanting it. And it's not going to be pushed away because you don't like it. Sometimes even when you go to the job, because it seems like it's halal job and it's good and everything, but you don't like it. You don't care if you're going to get the job or not. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get it. Actually, it works the other way. Maybe this is the type of work that you would get. Not that you would hate your job, but the rizq, as mentioned before many times, there is not even one ayah in the Quran that attributes the rizq to the human beings. So why the concern in the heart about the rizq from the human beings? It's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَفِي السَّمَاءِ رِزْقُكُمْ. Not fil ard. In the heavens is your rizq. Your provisions is in the heavens, not in the earth. You work physically in this life, but your heart is attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, and more of what he mentioned, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ تَبَارَكَ وَتَعَالَى بِقِسْطِهِ وَعِلْمِهِ وَحِلْمِهِ جَعَلَ الرَّوْحَ وَالْفَرَجَ فِي الْيَقِينِ وَالرِّضَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by his justice and knowledge and forbearance, he made the ease in al-yaqeen wal-rida, in the certainty and to be pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَجَعَلَ الْهَمَّ وَالْحَزَنْ فِي الشَّكِّ وَالسُّخْطِ. And he made the hamm, the distress and the grief and the sadness in the doubt and in the being angry or things of that nature. And one thing also that Al-Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah, he says, يا ابن آدم إن من ضعف يقينك أن تكون بما في يدك أوثق منك بما في يد الله عز وجل. That from the weakness of your yaqeen, the weakness of your certainty, that you would have more certainty in what's in your hand more than the certainty in what's in the hands of Allah. You have something already in your hand, right? Do you have weak certainty that you have it? You have it in your hand, or you have money in your bank account. Halal, right? Or you have money under the mattress, whatever. So you have money, right? So this money that you have it, you have certainty, there's no doubt you have it. But the statement, see how they would talk about al-yaqeen. That the yaqeen in what with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have more certainty than the yaqeen of what you have. This is not just words for a person to feel good. This is the reality of it. What's in your hand is by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He will, He can make it vanish immediately. So that means everything from the beginning to the end is by Allah. And it's with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So why should a person then have these distractions of the heart? The heart needs only one direction. The heart is not created to be wanting this and that. It's only one focus, which is to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. The hands and the legs, you have two hands, two legs, you can carry something and look at something. You know, the body can work many different things. But the heart, it's injustice to the heart to make the person have two hearts, three hearts, one heart in the dunya, one heart in the hereafter. ما جعل الله لرجل من قلبين في جوفه. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not make for a person two hearts in his heart. Sheikh Hussain Taymiyyah rahimahullah. Three things briefly how to learn al-yaqeen, how to have al-yaqeen. أحدها تدبر القرآن. There's no way out. Reflecting upon the Quran, learning the Quran. Take the time to learn the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again with the proper knowledge. And when we say tadabbur al-Quran, the ilm is Quran and Sunnah and what the Sahaba radiallahu anhum were upon, and all of that serves the understanding of the Quran. And not just to extract treasures and that's it, but to learn so that a person is upon the action. والثاني تدبر الآيات التي يحدثها الله في الأنفس والأفاق. That to reflect upon the ayat, the signs of Allah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it happens in oneself, in the afaq, in the horizon, what happens in the entire world. It's not that you would be watching the news, no, read the Quran. You would see what's happening, and it's all perfectly as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stated in the Quran. The more the person read the Quran, the more that he would see how miraculously is the Quran, as if it's revealed today. And the third one, al-amalu bimujab al-ilm. To act by what the knowledge necessitates. So you have the two types of ayat, which is the Quran talks always about two types of ayat, two types of signs. The universal signs, the physical creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the life of the people and nations. All of that is mentioned in the Quran. So these are the ayat, physical ayat, universal ayats, and the religious ayats. Al-ayat al-shar'iyya, ayatul Quran. So these two types of ayat is for the person to reflect upon, and al-amal bima أو بموجب العلم, to act based on what the knowledge that a person would have. And that's why that when the Sahaba radiallahu anhum immediately, even at the time of when they were in Mecca and they were tortured, the yaqeen was so much strong in their hearts that if you remember one time when we talked about the incident of Umar radiallahu anhu before he was a Muslim, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. And if we talk about the certainty of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Umar radiallahu anhu, and their life with this yaqeen, and the Sahaba in general, amazing things that never existed on the face of earth. And it's preserved, we have it. So this one incident when he used to torture, كان يتولى تعذيب جارية مسلمة. Before he was a Muslim, he was torturing a woman that she became Muslim. فلا يزال يضربها بالسياط, kept on beating her with السياط, the whip, حتى مل, till he got tired. Umar radiallahu anhu, how strong Umar, he kept on beating her till he was tired from beating her. So he said to her, إني أعتذر إليك أني لم أتركك إلا ملالة. The reason why I stopped is because I got bored. He said that to her. So what did she reply? She said, كذلك فعل الله بك. In that weak state, she said to him, this is what Allah did to you. This is what Allah made in you that you become in that state. What kind of heart is this? This is amazing. And some of these things, with the heart being strong like this, as the ulama, they say it changes the world. That means this can change the person in front of her in a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, with that yaqeen. with the strength and the power of the heart, that once it's there, then everything else becomes easy, because that's how the yaqeen haml al-person. There's many things in the sunnah that we can reflect upon, but maybe inshallah ta'ala we'll do that in other times. Otherwise, it's our duty, and especially in these days, and to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the Prophet ﷺ said, the meaning of which, that no one is given after al-mu'afah, after strength, better than al-yaqeen. So to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for al-afiyah, to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for al-yaqeen, for these actions to be present in the heart, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among the people of al-yaqeen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Muhammadin wa sahbihi wa sallam.